This week, on a little deeper, we are going to touch a subject that affects all of us. We have people in our lives who we love, we cherish, maybe family, friends, and they've drifted from the Lord. It's something that we see all around us. And how is it that we are called to react? That's what we're going to go into today. Father Peter.
RJ.
How are you?
Good.
Great to see you. Christ said to Simon Peter, "Simon Peter, do you love me?" Simon Peter said, "Lord, you know I do." And the Lord said, "Feed my sheep." And I think using this as a starting point today for this conversation about when we love someone and they're close to us in our lives, and we see that they've drifted, we see they're drifting away from the Lord and His church. How are we called to respond to that? If I love you, I don't just accept you. That's not love. And I think we should talk about the definition of love in the Lord's eyes.
So I think it's a common experience that we all have, because there are so many people that have left the church just in the last 10 years. I mean, when I started in the priesthood more than 30 years ago, it was dwindling, but the numbers just dropped off a cliff. So I think it's a fairly universal experience now, and with all the challenges in the world. And I think, so everybody is feeling that, saying somebody that I love is walking away from the Lord, certainly walking away from the church, but walking away from the Lord. And so in love, then, how do we respond? And I think the crux here, and that wording is deliberate, I think, that there is a cross in the midst of this conversation. In order to get through to the heart of it, we have to say, as you were posing the question, just sort of like, let's talk about love, because what would be a loving response to somebody who walks away? So I think the true love would be the kind of love, we know that the true love is the kind of love where you're willing to sacrifice for somebody.
Yeah.
And that's a very different kind of love, where you're ready to lay down your life for somebody. That's true love. And so if you honestly love the people in your life, whether it's a family member or whether it's just friends, if you honestly love them, what do you do when they start walking away? And I think that's important for us all to reflect on, because I think Jesus would say to us, first comes that word of caution to them. Like, do you know what you're doing? That you're walking away from the Lord? Or do you understand that your actions now, and we can't read people's hearts. We don't know what's in their hearts. We barely know what's in our own hearts.
But we can see the behavior. We can see the lack of a presence of God in their lives. We can see that they don't attend Mass, that they potentially live in sin. They've headed down the wrong path.
Right.
We can see that.
So there are certain things, and Jesus told us, like, an important way to discern that in your life and to view it in the lives of other people. What's the fruit? Like, what are they bearing? So if they're a good tree, they're going to bear good fruit. And I think we have to point that out to people and say, okay, you're making a choice to deliberately not attend church. You may be praying, you may not be praying, you may be doing what you think is prayer, but is it really? Is it intentional? Is it with your whole heart? Is it directed to God? Are you fulfilling that first commandment, which is to have God first and foremost in your life and in your heart and your mind and in all your actions? If that isn't the case, and it appears that you're just drifting away, well, then I have to in love, I have to then respond with a word of caution that says, what kind of fruit do you think your life is going to bear? I would like to tell you, fill in the blank, my loved one, my friend, I would like to tell you that you need to be aware of where you stand before God.
Yeah.
And is it going to bear fruit in your life?
Yeah. And the chances are pretty good if someone is watching you and I right now, they have a relationship with the Lord. So in their family, in their network, they're probably one of the most devout. And it is especially incumbent on us to understand the importance of speaking up and telling the people that we love what they need to hear, not necessarily what they want to hear, right? Especially, I think, if I'm just candid, in today's society, people want to hear that everything's okay. As long as you don't kill anybody, everything's okay. And that's not true. And if I love you, I have to tell you that, yes, you should, you need to obey the first commandment, which is the Lord should be first and foremost. That nothing else is before the Lord.
Right. So if the truth is this, that if you are able at this point to say, so you could say this to a loved one, like if you're able and willing to say to the Lord, no, where will it end? If you can say to him, no, I'm not going to go to church, I'm not going to pray that way, I'm not going to do this, I'm not going to, so you feel comfortable saying no to the Lord. Where is that going to end? So they always we like to compare ourselves to somebody else. So I'm a great guy because I'm not as bad as you, or we pick some horrible, I'm not as bad as Mao Zedong or something like that. So and I didn't kill 40.
Relatively speaking, I'm not
people.
that bad.
I'm not that bad. But the truth is, if they took the time to examine their lives, they're feeling anxious, worried, depressed. They're filling their life with all kinds of things and experiences because they're hollow inside. And if that trend continues, who's to say that you won't commit that you won't become that person that you've compared yourself to and said, I'm better than them? What's to say if you just keep drifting, you just keep moving, what's to say that you won't actually do all of those things?
Yeah, if the signs are there where that loved one, that person in our lives, a friend, a family member, there's an absence of prayerful life. There's an absence of devotion. You can see the practices, the secular practices that are not of God. It is unequivocally our responsibility to speak up. And even when that's uncomfortable. You recently mentioned during a homily that if the kids say, well, you're not going to be able to see the grandkids. Okay, but I have to tell you how I feel. I have to tell you what I know the Lord wants you to know. That's incumbent on us.
Right.
Yeah.
So there is that point of truth, and real love speaks the truth. And then there's the other side, which is, but you're not meant to harp on somebody. You're not meant to nag them. And so we all have that sense. Okay, I'm not supposed to nag. Right. So if they understand, I've said this to many, many people. They say, with my children or grandchildren or, the cousin or whoever it is in their life I said, do they understand where you stand? Do they understand what you believe? And they said, yes. And so then you don't need to say anything else, kind of thing.
Versus, well, I think so. Well, they should. Well, no, then
Right.
you need to go back and you need to address
So once
this.
you've made it clear where you stand and what you're, then at times it might very well be that you shouldn't say anything. And sometimes that silence speaks loudly. I know in my life, if I'm trying to have a ongoing relationship with God and there is silence, then it sort of makes me stop and say, is this just God, saying to me, you need to appreciate the silence. The silence works as a instigator, sort of, that draws my heart closer and closer to him, like that I'm longing more and more for him, that it sort of compels me and impels me to move someplace. Or is the silence because I'm speaking so much in my relationship with God that he's just silent. He's like, when you're done, then I'll talk, kind of thing. Or when you're ready to listen, then I'll talk. And I think we're supposed to be modeling God's love to people, essentially. So in everything that we do, we have to learn from God how to love and then model that to the people around us. So at times we know that sometimes that means a silence. The silence might be a comforting silence, might be an approving silence, or it might be sort of that silence that makes them stop and think and question what's going on here.
Yeah. The magnitude of Christ's love for us. The Lord, he suffered on the cross and died for us. And I think about that often when I think about having conversations with people who I know are drifting. And if I get that sense inside me that, like, this is going to be uncomfortable, I know it will be. I always think about the Lord died on his cross for us. The least that I can do is open my mouth and say what needs to be said.
Right. And that's the place of love, and I think, so it's that, like, I need to say something because he was certainly willing to go into uncomfortable situations. But then also, we need to model that to people, the kind of love that we have. So, because often we say people drift, because they don't really understand the love of God. They haven't been touched by a real love, and they're just trying to maybe we or somebody else has modeled a self-centered kind of love, and so they think in their own sort of personal panic or whatever it is, to be fulfilled, that they have to have something to sort of fill that space. And maybe haven't modeled that kind of love of God that is willing to suffer, that is willing to do without, that is willing to abstain from, this particular joy or pleasure, kind of in the world, to bring you to something deeper.
So do I recognize that as I'm helping that family member, and I know that I haven't always modeled the love that I should? Should I bring it up so that I identify that? Look,
always. I'm a great believer, and maybe somebody else would disagree. I mean, to a point. You don't have to bring all your food, because then they just sort of pick at you and say,
sure,
well, you're the problem because you did this and you did that. Well, we're all the same way. But I think if it starts with a real relationship of love, is always willing to say, well, I've done something wrong too, and to find that, to acknowledge that,
yes,
that I've done something wrong. And in a real sense, rather than just sort of, how people do that to manipulate.
yes.
Well, I might have, whatever, kind of thing. And you're like, so, but a real authentic confession of saying, I've gotten upset or angry, and I don't think God ever gets upset or angry, and so maybe I've modeled the wrong kind of love to you. The right kind of love is Jesus is willing to sacrifice. I've tried to figure out what other kind of motivation Jesus would have for the sacrifice that he underwent in his passion and death. Yeah. And the only one that you can really latch on that makes any sense is that he loves us. And so and he keeps calling us to that kind of a love. And so I have to come back and say, when have I failed to model that kind of a love? Where have I tried to score a point? I've tried to appear better in the eyes of somebody, or whatever, and so I think when we come to it with that honest kind of self reproach that says, I failed to show you real love. but I'm trying my best to do that now, and maybe we can work this. There is something here that I don't want you to walk away from, because it's real, it's authentic, it has to do with God. And I think if you miss this, nothing else is going to work. If you get this, everything else will work.
Yeah.
Kind of thing. It's like if you put the first commandment first, everything else works.
You and I were talking earlier about, I always have this image of, often during contemplative prayer, of Christ being with sinners, right? So he's with the tax collectors, the prostitutes, whomever, and being judged, right, by the Sadducees for having done so. But my image is that he's with them and he's loving them. But always at the end, he says, now go forward and sin no more. So it's not that he's embracing their behavior and saying, well, I'm going to look past all that. You just keep doing whatever that is. He doesn't. How do we bring that home to our own situations?
So I think there's a point where, where we have to stop and examine ourselves and say, well, here's my loved one. What can I say? Are they aware? They are aware of my position about all these kinds of things. Are they aware that at times that I haven't modeled God's love correctly? Have I been willing to share that with them? And then how do I move from there, which to say, I just need to tell you that certain behaviors are not going to bring you happiness. They're not going to bring you authentic love, and that's what your heart wants more than anything, kind of thing. And I want you to have that. I pray that you will have that in your life, but I believe God wants that in your life as well. Like first and foremost, God, the only way that I would be able to want that for you is that God has shown that to me in my life, that he wants authentic love. And so, he's the one that we're taking our direction from. And so God wants you to have this. So let's try, how can we trust God? Let's try to work this out. How is it that we can trust God? How is it that we can respond to God's love? How can we grow in God's love? What does God's love actually mean? And I think, if we were able to have those kinds of discussions with people that we love, long before they ever drifted or, whatever, when
they have.
Or when they have, but this is what God's love is really all about. This is what true love is really all about. Then I don't think it's as much of an issue. And if they say, well, I'm going to choose something else, okay, fine.
Yeah.
You know what I stand for. It's not that I'm perfect, but you know what I stand for, which is my stance before God, that we always have to be searching God out.
Yeah. Two conversations you and I have had in the past. The first you have with all of us all the time, that our home should be a sanctuary, right? It should be a sanctuary for the Lord. And I think often about when we invite people into our homes who are struggling on this road, right? That we can show that our homes are a place of peace for the Lord, right? His presence is there. I would never let an unmarried couple cohabitate in my house. Why? Well, one, because my home is a sanctuary. But two, if I love you, I will not encourage that behavior. I can't. The second thought that I have on that I want your feedback on is the old adage that we've all heard: love the sinner, hate the sin. Practically speaking, what does that mean for someone?
I mean, it's pretty obvious that we have to really hate the sin, and I think that's where people go wrong. It's like, okay, I have an understanding that I have to reverence this person, that I have to be willing to consider them a child of God and all the potential, potential for heaven and all of that. But then hating the sin is the part where we don't, because we don't want to, we find it difficult to separate it from the person. So the hating the sin is really important. And we have to have just in our own spiritual lives, in our own lives, we have to have sort of a revilement for our own sin. And that only comes through deep prayer, meditating on the consequences of our sin, how it hurts other people, how it hurts us, but especially how it
Confession.
hurts God. When we use the sacrament of reconciliation, that's a habit that we get in. And so we just get in a habit of hating sin, or we should. Our problem often is that we love sin and we dislike or we just tolerate the sinner, kind of thing. And so,
Yeah.
there's all of that. So it's a truism, yes, we should love the sinner and hate the sin. And then we need to say to the sinner, do you understand what that means? If you embrace this evil thing in your life, you will become evil. It will overcome you. It will take over the good that's in your life. This is the truth of the fall of Adam and Eve, kind of thing. If you embrace pride, that false pride, it will overcome all the good in your life and it will just eat it up. It'll consume
Yeah.
it. And, if you embrace untruth, lies and whatever, it will overpower all the good things in your life. If you embrace lust, sloth, anger, which a lot of us do, but if you embrace those things as if they're justified or useful in your life or just the way that things are, it will overcome you. So part of my job as a priest is to tell people there can be no place in your heart for these things. And they get angry. And so is it any wonder that if you have a loved one and you're saying you're letting pride or greed or whatever take over your life, I just want to warn you that that's a really dangerous thing. All the deadly sins, they're deadly. If it's playing with poisonous snakes, kind of things.
Yeah.
What do you think is going to happen?
When we put ourselves in that environment where in a mindset where we are closer to the Lord, where we do look at sin as sin, right? We don't embrace it or just accept it. Right. That helps us to create that environment for the people that we love, so we can better recognize their sin and help them on their journey.
And the truth is, then, if we understand the danger of sin in our lives, then we begin to understand how beautiful Jesus' sacrifice is, what is it, redemption really means. How he embraces, how he sort of takes in sin itself. He's willing to go to war against those sins, not against us, but against those sins. He's willing to go to war against those things. And how he battles them is with his love. And that kind of sacrifice where he just says, it's to the Roman soldiers that are slapping him and crowning him with thorns. And there's a part of his heart that says, fine, I love you. It's hard for me to understand that, but he's embracing their abuse, not because it's good, because he's taking on the sins of the world. He literally is absorbing it into himself, because if he absorbs it all, he knows the power of who he is as God, which is love, can overcome this. And we begin to learn that in our relationship with our loved ones, that they can say whatever they want to us. It's fine. Go ahead. I'm not going to, I don't jump back in their face when they start abusing me or saying vile things. Okay.
But you also don't give in.
Right. I can't, because that's sin. So I'm fighting the sin, but I'm willing to absorb it.
Yes.
I'm willing to take it in. Why? Because God gives me the strength to do that.
Yeah. Because
he's taught me what real love is, willing to suffer. And suffer at the hands of my loved ones, my friends, my, whatever.
That is love.
Right.
Yeah.
And because I know that God can transform this. So I have a real revilement for sin in the sense of what it can do. And yet I am in love. I'm willing to embrace the sinner who may be reviling me, abusing me, whatever. I'm willing to. That's a very, very difficult place to get to. We'd rather just cut it all off at the pass. We'd rather just say, okay.
Take the easy path.
Yeah, go ahead, go about your way. You're going to make your own choices.
Right,
I just have to let people make their own choices.
But that isn't love. Yeah.
Jesus would never do that for us.
No.
He mourns the sin of the sinner, kind of thing. He's always trying to get us back. He's always trying to reunite us.
And all we have to do is lean in.
Right.
Right. Thank you.
You're welcome.
So this topic, like so many, reminds us of where we should put our trust. And it's so clear that we should all trust in God.